This video is the third video in a series on authentication with MongoDB and Angular. So far we created our login and sign up pages, and this allows users to also create a token to authenticate themselves with. If you haven't seen that video, I'm going to leave the link to it in a card in the top right, so do check it out. In this video, we're now going to send that token into our middleware for Express, and this is going to allow us to protect specific routes to make sure only authenticated users have access to it. I've left the link to the source code in the description down below. If you head over there, there'll be two folders, so we have before and after. Before will contain the code at the start of this video, and after will contain it at the end of this video. So do join along if you'd like to. If you find this video useful, please give it a thumbs up, and also consider subscribing to the channel for more weekly videos around the areas of Java, Spring, Angular, and MongoDB. Okay, so far we've created our token for our logged in user and printed it to the console. So I'm just going to add a card to the playlist in the top right, just in case you haven't seen these videos. And what we would like to do now is pass the token into a variable and to send it through to our application. And this way our backend can then obtain this token, it can verify it before processing the user's requests. So we're currently printing the token in the auth service. However, I would like to store it in its own variable so it can be obtained throughout the application. So first I'll define a new private variable called token. It's going to be of type string. And then within the login user method, I will assign this .token as equal to the response.token. So now we're storing it in that variable. So we're currently facing a compile error in the auth service. So I will tell the post request to expect the response with a key of token, which is of type string. And I'm going to do this within angled brackets and curly braces. And if I take a look at the rest.js file, we can see we're passing the token in the JSON response. So that's sort of where we're making that connection. I'll also add a getter for the token within the auth service as it is stored privately, and this will simply return this .token. We will later use the getter whenever we want to verify the authorization details of the user when they make a request. So now that our token is stored, we want to use it to control access to allow or deny requests on the back end. To make our token available to the Express middleware, we will need to enrich our HTTP requests made from Angular's front end to now include that token. So once our requests are enriched with the token data, we can perform checks on the Express routes for a token and to validate the token. We're going to enrich our HTTP requests by creating a new implementation of the HTTP interceptor interface. The interface is used to transform incoming requests, usually by using an RxJS operator, and then passing that request onwards to other interceptors or just to its end destination. So at the moment it goes from start to the end, whereas now this interceptor is going to fit within the middle. And to begin, I will create a new interceptor TypeScript file in the shared folder. And I'm going to export the class of auth interceptor, and that is going to be implementing the HTTP interceptor interface. The class will have to implement the intercept method that will accept two arguments, so it will accept the request of type HTTP request and then next of type HTTP handler. And the next is going to allow us to forward the request journey onwards. So within the method, I'll create a new constant. I'm going to call this token, and that's going to be obtained from the auth service by using the getter. And I will inject the auth service through the constructor and call the getToken method. So if the token is not present, I will simply forward the request using an if statement and returning next.handle, and then the argument we'll pass in will be that original request. However, if the token does exist, I will instead enrich the request. So I will create a new constant, let's call this auth request, which will represent the new request. And this will be a clone of the current request. However, I will pass in a new header to the request as a JSON argument. and I'm going to assign the headers key with request.headers.set and to define a new header for the request. The key will be authorization, and that's going to be using the US spelling with the letter Z, and the value will be auth token, so just what we've defined earlier. And we'll touch on this letter Z a little bit later on and why that's important. Lastly, we then send the enrich request with next.handle, and then within the brackets I'm going to pass in auth request, which is our new enriched version, where our express middleware will now receive it. So yeah, just before we proceed, I'll share one small note on the header name we set. So the term authorization is a standardized request header used in HTTP for storing credentials to authenticate with a server. So it's kind of a standardized approach. This is why we've used the key as specified above. The last part of our interceptor is to ensure it is used for all HTTP requests of our Angular app. So first, I'm just going to mark the class with @injectable decorator to allow it to be provided to other areas of the application. Then I will head to the app.module file to pass this class within the providers block. So our application already has predefined interceptors as default within the application, we just don't see them. But I'm now going to add our auth interceptor on top of all of these. So to do this, I'll open curly braces within the providers block, and I'll be specifying exactly where it's going to be applied. So I'll be providing the HTTP interceptors from the common HTTP library, and I will specify the use class as our auth interceptor. So what the application is going to do now is actually override all the interceptors we currently use by default with our new interceptor. But to avoid doing this and to only use our interceptor on top, I'll specify a third argument, which is multi, and I'm going to set this as true. So now our auth interceptor will be used alongside all default interceptors for our HTTP requests. And as we have enriched our HTTP requests with the new authorization header, I will also need to update the rest.js file to accept authorization headers within the cause policy to ensure we don't see a cause failure. So if you're actually unfamiliar with cause, I'll add the link to my video on where we added cause to the application, and I'll do that in the top right. Okay, so the final piece of the puzzle is to now use our token in the middleware to obtain and verify the validity of the token in the request and to grant access to the endpoint if they're satisfied. So in our post endpoint for adding diary entries, I will add a middleware check before the endpoint is executed to verify that token. So first I'm going to add a new ES6 function, and this is going to accept the request, the response, and the next arguments. And I will first obtain the token with request headers and then authorization with the Z, and that's going to come exactly from our auth interceptor whenever we have a valid token. So we can verify the token with the JWT package that we use, and that's going to use the verify method. And what we're going to be doing here is passing in the token and the secret string that we use as the private key. So that will be secret_string as we've taken from elsewhere in our middleware. And JWT will use the token and the string to verify that the token was created by our application and on our server, and that it is not expired. So that's what this verify method is going to do. And if it does not fail, we can then call next. However, if it does fail, I'm just going to add a catch block and return a 401 status with the error message of error with authentication token. That now completes our token verification for the front end and the back end. We can now test this in our application. So first I'm just going to log in. We can't see anything in the browser console. However, if I now go to create a test diary entry, we can see it. I'll quickly restart our application and to remove the token from our browser. And if I now try to add any diary entries, we will now see that 401 error and the entry is not being added. So that concludes this video, and in the next video we will make several UI enhancements to reflect the logged in user, and we're going to make specific pages available or unavailable depending on their logged in status, and we're also going to take some interesting look at route guarding with our authentication. So I'll see you in the next video.